thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring everyone up to speed with what we're doing at Friedensville. And the talk is the title of the talk is Recreating the President Pumping Engine. And I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about some of the things we've done to recreate it, if you will, virtually and in models. But and you'll see here on this slide on the right, that's a still from an animated movie that has been made. And on the left, I think people will recognize that as a stereo view picture from 1876. So you can, it's kind of amazing to me anyway, with modern computer technology, what we're able to do. So really, today's discussion really has three parts. First, just some general background information on the Friedensville. And then we're talking it. And then lastly, some of the activities we have underway to preserve the site where this engine was located, which is also known as the Uberoth mine. So Friedensville zinc mines, just some 19th century milestones. I'm sure all of you are aware there was also a 20th century Friedensville mine. I'm not going to talk about that today, but if you're interested, I can refer you to a gentleman who I know knows a lot about it. That's Mike Connar. And he I think interned in the Friedensville mine in the 20th century and is quite knowledgeable about it, as he is with the 19th century mine. So some milestones, zinc mining commenced there in 1853. The two main characters who really developed the mines were an inventor by the name of Samuel Wetherell, but Joseph Wharton of Wharton School of Business fame was the guy who really had the commercial knowledge to really pull the mine together, make it profitable, mine and the factory, because the mine is located 4 miles south of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Lehigh County, and the actual smelter and factory was located in Bethlehem, about 4 miles away over a hill, and they would take the ore from the mine by mule trains early on, over the hill, and then it was smelted and the products made in Bethlehem. Started out zinc oxide, but quickly developed into metallic zinc, and then later a rolling mill, and really work like many industries really helped develop the mine from an economic perspective. Water was always a big problem with the mine, and we'll talk more about that, and that is why the famous President pumping engine was built. Lehigh Zinc Company was the name of the company. They closed the mine in 1876. And Lehigh Zinc was principally Philadelphia Quaker investors, but the mines were purchased in 1881 by Franklin Osgood and New York investors, and it reopened in 1881 and operated to 1893. And then the mine closed entirely for the 19th century. The engine itself was scrapped in 1900. New Jersey Zinc bought the property in 1899, but they really didn't have any intention of operating it. They really just wanted to hold the ore in reserve, and probably were very interested in keeping anybody else from mining there. So when the mines operated in the 1860s and 70s, early on, is really I think probably like a lot of mining communities, the mine captain, the senior engineers, the foreman, the steam engine technologists, operators were from Cornwall for the most part. A lot of the guys who actually were doing the work were Irish. And in the Friedensville area, there was a community which consisted both of the Cornish and the Irish, very near Friedensville, a little village called Colesville. I've often wondered how they got along, but not too many reports of any major fights at the time. But I think the group dynamics would have certainly been interesting to see. And Mike, this is really an advertisement for Mike. Mike at the conference is going to talk about a small cemetery, which is really the only physical remains of this community, because when the mines first shut down in 1876, the Cornish miners, anyway, for the most part, moved away. But there is a small cemetery remaining, and we've been doing a lot of work to try to figure out who's in there and try to get it preserved. And Mike will talk more about that at the conference. So water was a major issue with this mine. These are photographs from the 20th century, but just a couple quotes from the 19th century from the mining, one of the mine engineers. Water had to be fought by the pumps throughout every foot sunk for every minute in the life of the mine. Or to put the matter another way, the water flowing into the shaft would fill to a depth of 27 feet in 15 minutes. So it was an extremely wet mine. They started to realize water, even when they got down to a depth of 50 feet. And the mine ultimately in the 19th century got down to about 250 feet. So once they started to get to 50 feet level, they started to have problems, started to come up with different pumping solutions, some cases, multiple pumps. But as they got to, the 150 foot level or so, 200 foot, nothing was working. So that's when they built the President. It was built by John West. He was a Cornish-born engineer. Started out his career in the Perkiomen Valley, where there were copper mines. Perkiomen Valley is southeastern Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia. There were active copper and some lead and silver mines in that region in the 1850s, late 1840s, 1850s. John West came from Cornwall, started there, where he introduced a number of pumping engines. So he was hired by Lehigh Zinc Company to build something that was actually going to solve the problem. That's where we got the President. It was a massive engine. It had two lattice work beams, 36 foot end to end, two 30-foot diameter flywheels, double acting. Said it could generate 3,000 horsepower at 30 to 60 psi. It's a single cylinder engine. So from what our research has indicated, it was the largest single cylinder stationary rotative steam engine ever made anywhere really in the world. John West designed it. It was actually built in Philadelphia by a foundry along the riverfront in Philadelphia. And the building that it was housed, it was a house-built engine that was built by a Cornish master builder. And the operators of the engine, at least in the early couple of years, were all from Cornwall. So it ran from 1872 to 1876, and then intermittently in that period, it was capable of pulling 17,000 gallons a minute of water out of the mine, or 25 million gallons a day. It did the job well. It only had one breakdown that we have uncovered. A lot of the farmers in the neighborhood were not very happy because their wells went dry, but it clearly did the job that it was intended to do. Just switching to what have we done to try to recreate it. This quote has resonated with me a great deal as I thought about our recreation process. But if we didn't have information and research available through libraries and museums, none of this would have been possible. Vartan Gregorian was the guy in charge of bringing the New York library system back to life in the 1970s. Quite a challenge, and he did a good job with it. So what did we know, or what didn't we know when we started to recreate the engine? Well, the engine house itself, you can see it in the upper left-hand corner there. It's a ruin. All four stone walls are still standing for the most part. There's some, obviously, some deterioration, but in the main, the four walls are standing. The engine itself was scrapped entirely in 1900. There was one steam boiler that survived. All the original drawings are missing. We've talked to some of the guys at New Jersey Zinc when the mine closed in the 20th century in 1984, and they say that drawings existed, but nobody knows where they went. And so I keep a hope that they're in somebody's attic and they'll be found someday. But we've looked around to all the different other potential places it could be, and they have not been found. We have no photographs of the engine. Nobody snapped a shot of it. But we do, and we have very little information on the boiler house itself. We know it had 20 boilers. We know what the boilers that look like, but in terms of how it's configured, we do not have a lot of information. So what did we know? Well, we had the ruins of the engine house. So, even though the engine house is a ruin, because it was never used for anything else other than to be the support and shelter for this engine. A lot of the indentations, the configuration within the engine house is informative with regard to the engine itself. We also found the specifications, 26-page specifications. They're without drawings, but they're quite detailed in terms of all the pieces and parts. They don't quite put it all together for us, but they certainly tell us a lot about the individual components. We do have engravings and descriptions from various technical journals. The Engineer, Scientific American, both published engravings of the engine at the time that it was started up. And we have student thesis information from Lehigh and Lafayette, both at the time, mining engineering students, seniors had to write a thesis, and a number of them wrote theses on the mines and on the engine. One student in particular at Lafayette did these detailed drawings, which we're sure he took those probably from original drawings. And of course, they've been helpful. And then we have a lot of exterior photographs of not a lot, but we have a number of exterior photographs of the engine house and mine, which we could use to do our recreations. So taking all that information together, we've managed to pull together a display at the National Museum of Industrial History in Bethlehem. It's in the center hallway as you go back to the main exhibition room. And the centerpiece of that display is this scale model that you can see in the case. This is a close-up of the model. It's on a mahogany stand. A scale is 1 to 38. It was made by a award-winning model engineer in England by the name of Tony Mont. I think Damian Nance is probably familiar to a lot of MHA members. And Damian's brother came upon Tony at a county fair, and they exchanged names. They said, "Well, are you in relation to Damian Nance?" And he said, "Yes, he's my brother." So, well, he published an article about this engine called the President. I'd like to model it. And so that's how the conversation started. That was in late 2017. And by 2022, we had a model. So it took us 5 years to get it made, exchanging information back and forth, and Tony working on the model to get it done. But we're very pleased to get the model to the museum in 2022, which happens to be the 150th anniversary of when the engine was first inaugurated in 1872. So if this works, you're going to, if the model works on compressed air, I think when I push the button again, it may run for us. There we go. You can, we put a little compressed air tank down below. You can see the figure there, just to get a sense for scale of the size of this engine. Also part of our display is this cutaway view. We commissioned a very talented graphic artist by the name of Alexander Carnes. He's a young man. Not only is he a graphic artist, but he's also an expert in maintaining and restoring steam engines. That's his life's passion. He's been throughout America, England, India, been really all over the world. And in addition, he's this fantastic graphic artist. This is a pencil sketch. It's 18 by 24. I've watched him do his work. It basically hardly uses a straight edge. He's an incredibly talented fellow. And so we had him do this drawing because it allows us to take a look at what the engine would have liked inside the house. And so this drawing is now part of the display at the National Museum. Then we were approached. We did a presentation actually at Lehigh for their library, Friends of the Lehigh Library. And that got online, and we were contacted by Guy Jansen, who lives in Belgium. And Guy's a retired nuclear engineer, but he has this passion for steam engines. And he's done these amazing models, animated models of steam engines, really starting back with Savory and Newcomen all the way through Watts and beyond. And he approached us and said, "Yeah, I'd really like to model this engine." So that started another journey, and we worked with Guy for a period of around a year to make a movie on the president. And I'm not going to show the movie tonight because it is in itself 20 minutes long. But it is, if you're interested in seeing it, it's available on YouTube. I would just go President Pumping Engine, Guy Jansen. You'll pull it up, and what you'll see is the exterior of the mine. He's included the mine itself, the Uberoth mine, the other auxiliary buildings, as well as the pumping station. And you can see there the one photo on the upper right. There's the boiler house, and of course the two lower views are back of the engine house, or front, depending on your viewpoint. Also the interior, he's done the boiler house, the engine itself, and right down into the pump shaft. So you can really see not just the engine, but also how it operated in the pumping mechanisms. There's actually a longer version, which in overall that gives the length of the movie 30 minutes. And there you can actually go inside the engine, if you will, and see the mechanical operation of the engine. So we really made these two versions. One's a shorter version, which doesn't include all the engineering detail, and then the longer 30-minute version, which does. So for those of you who are really interested in how pumps work and pistons and all that, certainly recommend the longer version. So going to the last part is, what are we doing on the site to preserve it? It's Mike knows the site well. It's really a 19th century mining time capsule, if you will, because when the mining stopped there in 1893, nothing really much else happened. New Jersey Zinc never really used the Uberoth mine for any purpose, and so it's vegetated. But and obviously mining companies being mining companies, you took away everything that could move. But there's still a lot of foundational ruins, as well as the ruins of the engine house there on the site. There's waste piles, and we found evidence of where the inclines were and stuff. So because it was never used for anything else, it's a very interesting site. We think the preservation of the site is important because it's really the whole zinc from the mine to the plant in Bethlehem was really the first modern industrial age business in the Lehigh Valley. It really preceded the steel industry by a number of years. So it's really the first modern industry in the valley. The engine house itself is a landmark machine, really the part of the largest, most powerful single cylinder steam engine ever built. And then the engine house is really the only surviving example of a house built Cornish style pumping engine house in America. And I think, as we know, that there's in Cornwall, where they have about 200 of these ruins. A couple of them are actually still operating, but the vast majority are ruins, much like the president's engine house. They really form the key iconic structure of a UNESCO World Heritage landscape. So that, I think, when we put this all together, we've been able to really excite the heritage community here, Lehigh University and Lehigh University, which owns the property. This is a nice winter view of the engine house. You can get a sense for the pump shaft, which is behind the house. It's still open. We do have a fence around the structure to keep people away, but it's the pump shaft is still open. You can look down into the water. You can see just a corner of the Uberoth mine pit in the background, which is also water filled. These are just some scenes from around the Uberoth mine. You can see it's quite scenic, different times of year, and it's a very lovely site, really. So what are we doing to preserve it? You can see the engine house up close with all its warts on the left-hand side. You can see it's in pretty dire condition. The walls are standing, but there's some bows in it. A lot of the lintels are failing. It has still, although we've taken vegetation off, it still has vegetation on it where they just couldn't quite get it. So it's in pretty bad condition. Of course, in Cornwall, we have many of these structures. They're many of them been very fondly preserved, restored. Same is true in Australia, Mexico, Spain, other countries which had a Cornish presence and had these engine houses. The fact that this is the only really surviving pumping engine house in America, it's been a surprise to me. Not a surprise, but yeah, somewhat of a surprise that it's been the Cornish American community here in this country has been very interested in it. We've given quite a number of talks to them, but also the Cornish in Cornwall are very interested because, of course, a big part of the UNESCO World Heritage landscape that they were approved by UNESCO is based on the fact of the Cornish influence throughout the world. So having this one surviving Cornish engine house, and there were others, but this one surviving one in North America has been a great interest to them. So Lehigh University owns the property. We have gotten a couple grants from the state. They're called Keystone Preservation Grants, and also a grant from the National Trust. These are all planning grants, so they haven't really allowed us to get any work done. But what they have allowed us to do is to hire a bunch of consultants. So with those funding, we've and matching funding from Lehigh and some other sources, we have been able to get the vegetation for the most part off the engine house. We did a 3D scan of the engines, which created 760 million data points. So I've been told we can tell if a stone is moved by a 1/16 of an inch. And looking at the site over the years, this was done in 2019, 2020. I know stones have moved, but this we do have this detailed scan which we've used to create construction drawings. So we were able to hire. We were able to hire a structural and architectural engineering companies to really do a comprehensive assessment of the engine house. And then we hired one of those firms to actually do construction drawings so that we can effect a repair. And more recently, we hired a architectural firm to give us some conceptual drawings about what the site might look like. The general plan is to have it be a public space, a heritage site of some kind. Lehigh's looking at some potential recreational opportunities associated with that. But the plan is, and we give a target within the next 5 years, to be able to have this as an open heritage site that people can come and enjoy a structure that's been repaired and stabilized. So here's a conceptual drawing of what that might look like. The view is that you'd have a walkway around the engine house. You'd be able to go around the back and look over into the Uberoth mine pit. You'll see in the fore left-hand side, that's that one I mentioned. There's one surviving boiler. I will talk about that again, but our plan would be to have that at the site as an artifact for display. Here's a overhead bird's eye view, if you will, of the back of the engine house. It's actually as interesting as the front because you can really see the stonework right down to the pump shaft. And there's a lot of interesting features in that stonework. But you'd have a circular walkway around that you could come walk around, observe it, look down to the pump shaft. Obviously, there'd be a fence to prevent you from, keep you safe. The thinking will be we'll be able to go inside the engine house, and there'll be a platform, and the platform would be located at the same location where this large single cylinder was located. It would be the same size, or if bigger, there'd be some kind of a indication in the platform of the cylinder size. That was 110 inches diameter, so that's a little over 9 feet in diameter. That boiler, we were able to, that one boiler survived as a water tank in the basement of a furniture factory in Allentown. And the furniture factory closed some time ago, but the boiler remained as a water tank, really got into the furniture factory when the factory was built in 1901. So it was in there for 120 years as a water tank. The building's now scheduled to be demolished, and so it was taken out of service because of that. It's in the basement, right in the middle. They didn't have any plans of ever taking it out, so there was no easy way to get it out other than to remove the first floor of the building. And you can see in that second floor that we made an opening, and then got a crane company, contractor, local contractor, who specializes in historic preservation type projects, to gently get the boiler out of the basement. It's 30 feet long, so they pulled it out. They got it onto a flatbed. The big thing we had to overcome was the lip on the basement window had to be chipped away. You can see, to actually get the end of the tank out into the street. There it is on a truck, and this the still below is from the movie, so it would have you can see where it would have been in its original condition. It would have been encased in brick. One of 20 actually had 22 boilers to operate this engine. 20 were always in service, and 2 were always out to be descaled. So the other very pleased to get this year was in December. We got a approval for a Pennsylvania state blue sign, roadside marker. I think most states have these, but Pennsylvania has a road or town marker program. We were one of 36 that were approved in 2022, only one of 2 in the Lehigh Valley. So our plan is to have this sign in front of the engine house in 2024. We're going to do a little bit of landscaping improvements so that it actually looks nice. Right now, the street view is kind of weed infested. So plan is to get that cleaned up and then have that sign. There'll be a little ceremony with the local officials and the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission people when we get the sign up. So we do have a preservation fund. It's Lehigh University. They own the property. And so we've been really developing a plan on how we might raise funds. I think Lehigh's prepared to provide some funding for it, but they're not prepared to fund it independently. So we're going to need to get hopefully some rich Lehigh donors who are also Cornish will step forward and want to give us a ton of money, because they will take a fair amount of money. You can see the condition of the building. We're probably talking a project of a couple $1 million. So that's me. That's the story. We have a website. I would encourage you to take a look at it. www.friedensvilleminesHeritage.org. And that's the story. So happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah.
Questions, comments, people? Oh, could you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, yeah. I can do that, I think. Pause share, right? Pause share? Sorry.
Well, is there a stop?
Yeah, look at that. Stop share. There we go. Aha. Did I de-share?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
Questions, anyone? Comments?
That was really nice, Mark. I've been there before. Mike had told me how to find it, and I saw it when it was all covered with poison ivy, red colored poison ivy in the fall one time. and so I'm glad you got those vines off there, but I wouldn't have been able to get near those vines.
No, me either.
And Damian Nance is a fantastic guy. He came down and looked at, in Maryland, we had an old copper mine, 1853 ruins of an engine house, just one and a half story wall still standing, and he came down to look at it because he's all things Cornish engine houses.
Yeah. The Dollarhide mine, right? That was the Dollarhide mine.
Oh, yep. I'm the one who turned him on to that. And of course, Gap had one, the Gap nickel mine, but all this stuff's gone. All this stuff's gone.
Yeah, there was quite a few down in, well, I guess as I started to think about it, why is it, I mean, a lot of the Cornish came here in the late 1840s, early 1850s. They came to in our area, they came to, southeastern Pennsylvania where they had those, the copper mine activity. And this is what they knew. This is what they built. So there was a number of them at the Perkiomen mines, the Gap mine you mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah, again, there's nothing there at all. There's nothing there now at the Gap mine. It's Amish farm land, but but it's kind of it just by because I think the property was neglected. This engine house managed to survive, but it's been like I said, the interest in by the Cornish in it has been tremendous.
What I found down my way is more of the Cornish pumps being run by water wheels. I found some water wheel pits, and then they would use a Cornish pump, but they use an American style engine, I guess, run really slow to put the motion to the Cornish rods.
Yeah.
And so because it was near the Beano Railroad, and that's probably what they had, and it was easier to adapt than to build a monstrosity of a building.
Yeah. Well, this is if Damien was on the line, he would caution me to tell you that it is not a classic. The President's not a classic Cornish pumping engine because it's double acting. Number one, the typical classic Cornish pumping engine would be single acting, right? And it's also rotative, which most of the Cornish pumping engines on the power side were not rotative. But the reason for that is the mine's pretty shallow, and just to generate the power that they needed to extract the water, John West made it double acting and also rotative. So because the mine's pretty shallow, it's only goes down 225 to 230 feet. It's always amazed me that the ore was considered so rich that it was worth the while to have the cost of removal water in the cost stack, which of course in 1876, that's one of the reasons it shut down is the cost stack was they found some other zinc sources that were able to get to, didn't have the same water issues, but then it reopened again because the ore is very pure. It doesn't have much in the way of arsenic or antimony or other contaminants. And European governments were finding that they charges from using Friedensville zinc, the barrels wouldn't jam. So they got quite a few contracts from the Ottoman government, the Russian government, then finally even the British government gave them a contract. So, but I think that work was all kind of contractual, so that kind of come and go. So the mine had a kind of a fitful second life, and from 1881 to 1893, it was kind of on and off.
Well, the early ores were there after were the carbonates and stuff, right? And so as New Jersey Zinc got into the sulfides deeper, but they were after the stuff that was near the surface that was easy to reduce.
Well, yeah, early on in Friedensville, the 1850s, it was the oxidized ores. You're right, it was the smithsonite and the hemimorphites. I mean, that's what they were picking off, and that had a high zinc content, right? But then even in the 19th century, then they were going into the sphalerite and the zinc that was really encased in the country limestone. So they had lime kilns there that they were burning some of that off before they took the ore down to Bethlehem for smelting processing. So, but it's always
the old log books show that they were hand sorting, and the pack trains were transporting 45% zinc, which of course was higher than what was actually in the mine. But then contrast that when New Jersey Zinc was running it, if they got 5% at any given day, they were lucky.
Well, the Weatheralls were lead paint first, and then they got the zinc paint because the painters were dying from lead poisoning, and the zinc paint was much safer. And so there was that transition going there in the 1850s, 1860s of the style of paint to be used.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have heard that they said that zinc also, though, I think they were able to get better coverage with using zinc. And I think it was actually got a little whiter as well. So, because they were importing this French, what do they call it, French zinc. That they were importing that before Weatherall came up with a process to take zinc ore and extract zinc oxide directly from the ore. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation about where's the birthplace of zinc industry, because Weatherall started his work in New Jersey in a predecessor company to New Jersey Zinc, and he developed his process there. But they were using the Franklinville ores, but they weren't getting very good results. And in fact, I don't think they were able to sell it, so they were actually throwing it in their own paint, and I don't think they were getting much luck with that either. So. But he developed this process. He found out about the Friedensville. He learned about the Friedensville ores. He tried his process with the Friedensville ores, and it's getting better. Got good results. So he went back to the New Jersey Zinc people, said, "Hey, listen, because he cut his own private deal on the ore in Friedensville. So I got the ore source that works, and I got this patent in process." And I guess they said something to him along the fact, "Well, you actually came up with that process in our lab, so maybe we own it, not you." And I guess he gave them the bird and took his coat and left and went to Bethlehem and built his plant in 1853 and started to operate the mine to feed the plant. So, but it's that whole zinc story gets interesting even further, because he and Joseph Ward's the guy who really got it commercial, and but they were like oil and water. So.
It was one of the first great hostile takeovers in the mining.
I was going to say it was a love-hate relationship, but everything I read, I think it was kind of a hate-hate relationship. I don't think I think they really weren't even talking to each other after a point. So, but I guess you have to give credit for really turning it into a successful business to Wharton, who was a pretty smart guy, because when they started to really have a lot of water in 1863. And that was about the time they brought in John West to start to solve it. Joseph Wharton sold his entire interest out, and that's when he got into the nickel business. And so I guess he knew that old Cornish adage: when the water flows in, the dividends flow out. So I think he decided to move on to better pastures. Of course, he was a pretty smart guy, right? I mean, he actually took the nickel and got the United States to after the Civil War to make a 5-cent coin out of nickel. So that was a pretty smart move. So yeah, I guess he was one of the most successful industrialists in the 19th century for a reason. So.
Anyone else?
I'll just thank Mark for the plug for the Socorro talk that we're going to do as part of the mining cemetery session, because there's a really interesting history to the old Cornish cemetery at Friedensville. And again, Mark, as the guy on the scene, has really done yeoman service to help make sense out of what's going on there. And that's what we'll be talking about in Socorro.
Well, I'm looking forward to that cemetery session. I think that's really going to be the highlight of the whole conference.
Yeah, we're dying to see it.
Ah!
Yeah, I know. Well, I've been working with Mike on the presentation. I know it's going to be good, and we've had a couple. We really started this whole thing with the local. It's actually the property is now owned by the local Catholic Church, and when we first went to them, first they denied owning it, and once they had to fess up because we showed them they had to fess up that they actually did own it. Their initial reaction was, "Not our people, not our problem. We're doing nothing." So, but I think they've started to come around a little bit on that. So that's a good thing.
Well, how did the Catholics end up? I guess you'll tell us how the Catholics end up owning a Cornish.
Yeah, I don't want to steal Mike's thunder on that one.
Right.
Okay, great. Anything else?
I just wanted to ask, do you have any mineral specimens of the Smithsonite from way back when?
There are some in museums. I should let Mark answer this, but because
Yeah.
Lehigh has some specimens actually in their geology department right on display. Otherwise, your best bet is to surf the web and see what's coming up for sale.
I was going to say, I gave a talk. Gave a live talk on this last week, and I got because I get notices on eBay for anything for Friedensville, and on Sunday, that talk was on Wednesday. On Sunday, came up Smithsonite sample from Friedensville. So I jumped right on it, bought it right away. I actually negotiated the price, believe it or not. I said, "Guy, you got it down a little bit, not a lot." And I got it just the same day as I gave the talk. So I was able to take the Smithsonite sample to the talk. Now I showed it to you on the line here, but it's down on my car because we're doing a photo shoot at the mine tomorrow for, we're going to have an article in the Lehigh Alumni magazine. So I took a couple show and tell stuff, and my Smithsonite example is for show and tell, and the Mike, and I use your hemimorphite example from Mexico too, but I really couldn't pass up the Smithsonite example directly from the Uberoth mine. So
yeah, when you see them on Mindat or on any of the auction sites, you got to jump on them because they're on the property out there. And all the years that Mark and I have traipsed around on it, I have never actually seen a piece of the early ore, either the Smithsonite or the hemimorphite. So you find it in old collections. And one of the best collections supposedly was the Philadelphia Academy of Sciences. And about 5 years ago, the curator there, or the head of the museum, whoever he was, decided they didn't need to talk about geology anymore. So he sold off the collection. Now, unfortunately, from being what was a great consolidated collection of Friedensville minerals, that's being sold piece by piece all over the world. So
Is that when they
no
sold off
longer.
the same time they sold off the Lewis and Clark specimens too?
Yeah.
One interesting part of research you might look into, I found for some of my old 1850s Maryland stuff, is the New York Exposition, 1853, 1854. There's a catalog online that lists what specimens are on display from different mining districts in the East. So London had their big exposition like 1849, 50, and then New York copied it in 1853, 54. And there's no pictures or drawings, but there's just good descriptions of all the minerals and products and stuff like that. So you might find something that describes, if Wetherell or Wharton supplied, specimens for display in that part of the big, it's sort of a World's Fair, the New York Exposition.
yeah, yeah. And Lehigh Zinc had a display also in the 1876 centennial.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I have to say I'm not a mineralogist, but Smithsonite, when I said, well, that's drop dead ugly, but it's all kind of brown and but I looked at that, and then I was over at the site like next day, and Mike, I actually saw a small chip. And I didn't pick it up. I picked it up and I put it back down. But you know what? When I go over there tomorrow, I may mosey over and pick it up. They're a very small chip with it's quartz on one side. And flip it over, and there's just a tincture of it's either I'm not sure if it's hemimorphite or Smithsonite because they're very similar in appearance, right? But it's brown granular, So I'm pretty sure it's one of the two, and maybe I'll go back and pick it up. It's a really, really small chip.
Well, the Smithsonite from the Kelly mine is really beautiful, and it's like this bluish green color. So there's plenty of great specimens at the Mineral Museum in Socorro that folks will see who are going to the conference. And I have a few small samples myself.
Well, this one's really this one from Friedensville is it's brownish, very brownish with a little bit of a tincture of some gray element. Maybe that's the zinc. I don't know, but it'd be hard pressed to call it pretty. you know.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's typical of many of our ore minerals in the East.
Yeah.
Well, the easy stuff that was sticking out of the ground when the farmers found it was pretty much all oxidized and ugly.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the oxidized ore that when Roper came by and to Farmer Uberoth, and they shared stories, and they took it back to Bethlehem to a local foundry there, and they combined it with copper, and he figured out it was zinc because it made brass. That was oxidized ore, so it wasn't the sphalerite. That was the stuff on the surface that the farmer was complaining about because it wouldn't burn in his kilns, and it's ground particularly fertile and blah blah blah. But so he kept hoping that it was some valuable metal. I think he wanted it to be gold, but it turned out not to be that. So problem one was solved. They figured out it was zinc, but this was 1845. Problem two was they didn't have a process to do anything with it. So until 10 years later, roughly 10 years later. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. That was very interesting.
Well, thank you
And
for the
good luck
opportunity.
on the future of your project.
you.
Yeah.